I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Hello, my friends. Here we are with the Life Shift podcast, and I am here with a coworker and friend, Diane Diaz. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, so Diane and we work together, and we actually shared a wall, right? We shared a cubicle wall for a time period.
Yes.
Back when we used to go to work.
Yeah, I call it BC, before COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we have worked together for a few years now. We've actually worked at the same university for many years, but
long time.
Yeah, but now we're in the same department, so we just see each other on Zooms. But Diane has a story today about, there's a lot in your story today, but I think what is going to be most impactful for the listeners is the growth and what you've done with the story that you have, because I think a lot of people will relate to what you went through, but also be inspired by what you've done with it. And the Life Shift podcast, we've had a lot of people that talk about that. And when I hear from listeners, it's always like, I feel so inspired, even though I don't have that exact story, right? That commonality of like the human experience, because we're not alone in some of these traumatic events, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Well, before we get into it, maybe you can just give us a little bit of who you are and share a little bit about, kind of what Diane's life looks like right now.
Yeah. Okay. So as you said, I'm Diane Diaz, and I pretty much a lifelong Floridian. I've lived all except I'm 55. Well, I'll be 56 in July. So I've lived all but about 5 years of my life in Florida, in some place of Florida.
Wow.
So I grew up in the Panhandle. Yeah. Yep. Lifelong Floridian. So I, as you said, we teach together at a university. And then I also am a speaking coach at Speaking Your Brand. So, work with women entrepreneurs and professionals to help them tell their stories, interestingly. so that's fun. And what my life looks like now, well, I have 2 jobs and just moved into a condo, very busy, just moved into a condo and, just trying to manage 2 jobs and
pandemic,
all the things going on, the pandemic, all the craziness in the world, gas prices, all of those things.
There's a lot going on. And I don't know you very well, but from what I do know, I've always been inspired by your work ethic and your passion for what you do. I think that is palatable. I think that other people notice that very easily. And I'm sure that's not easy to show, but I do want you to know that I've always admired the way you approach things and how much you care, because in our world, there's so much that gets thrown at us and situations that we have to deal with. And I always felt like, wow, she really takes that and goes, okay, let's go. Let's make this a positive experience. Whereas a lot of people we work with, maybe not directly, but other people in our sphere may get angry or question it, or, and so I do want you to know that I notice that. And it is inspiring to work with people, because there's some people around you too that do the same thing. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. And so I will say that a lot of that does come with age and experience. And also I came from the corporate space before I came to where we teach. And so lots of lessons there, lots of lessons.
I also think that what you're about to share with us, that I'm going to have you paint that picture, I think a lot of that is, or what you do now, stems from kind of that experience before kind of these. I feel like you have 2 pivotal pieces in your life that probably create the human that you are today. So maybe you can just kind of go back and paint a little bit of those pictures of where you feel your biggest life shifts and kind of why you are the way you are now.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, these types of conversations often feel like therapy, but I think they're supposed to, because you are reflecting on what brought you to where you're at. Yeah. So if I go back and think about those pivotal moments. I think one of them, interestingly, one of them was when I was a child, which, I don't remember a lot from childhood, probably mostly because of the trauma that happened. So I grew up in Pensacola, small town. My mother was the oldest daughter of Italian immigrants, and so she had siblings, but she was the last one to get married. She actually did not get married till she was 39. And I think the only reason she ended up marrying my father is because she didn't want to be what, quote unquote, an old maid, right? Because she was Italian too, and you're supposed to get married and have babies. And so she married him, and I think found out, I don't know if she found out before they were married or after they were married, but he had been married 2 other times and he was younger than her. So I was like, what's going on there? So then he was in the Navy, so ended up getting stationed in Pensacola. My mom from New York, Brooklyn, she had to move to Pensacola, which was like moving to middle of nowhere USA at the time.
Still.
And, moving from, oh, yeah, totally. No slight to anybody that lives there, but I don't even go back there. So, now she finds herself with 2 children and an alcoholic husband. And really, because she didn't have any friends because she moved there from, not knowing anyone. And then unfortunately, I think in the military at that time, I don't know how it is now, but at that time, she couldn't even go to his commanding officer or anybody. It was like they protected their people, right? And so there was nobody to go to with, hey, my husband's abusive. He's a drunk. He's scaring the children. He's doing these things. He never really hit me, but I did see him hit my sister. And I witnessed him throw a footstool down the hall after my mother. And it was just a lot of fear and intimidation and that type of stuff. And so I just remember as a child, having neighbor friends and going to their houses and seeing that, oh, wait a minute, this isn't going on here. Like, why isn't your dad yelling at your mom? Why isn't your dad trying to hit you? And thinking, oh, it could be different. And so I just knew that I needed to not have that life. I just remember being maybe 6, 7 years old and knowing I need to not have the life that my mom has when I get to be a grown up.
Yeah. As a 6-year-old. Wow.
Yeah. As a 6-year-old thinking, and I will say, of course, after much therapy and looking back on it, children in those types of situations start to take on adult worry and adult thinking because it's a self-protection mechanism, right? So obviously I know that now, but at the time it's just like, how can I have a different life? How can I not be reliant upon someone and then be stuck? How can I create a life that feels safe? And so, fortunately for me, I'm not sure it's this way anymore, but school was a safe place for me. So I always loved school because the teachers were so lovely and just, sweet to me.
It
And
was like the opposite of your home life.
yes, yeah. Yeah, and it just felt like a safe space. And so I've always had this thing that I love the smell of books and I love going into a library. I like that smell. I like school settings. They just feel safe to me. So I think I knew early on, my mom didn't have an education. She went to high school, but she did not have a college education. However, she was one of the smartest people I knew because she read everything. And she always encouraged my sister and I to, get an education, but also to understand how to use language. And maybe partly because her parents didn't speak English and she had to translate for them. So she wanted us to have good command of the English language. And so she was very pivotal there, but I knew my only way out of Pensacola and my only way not into a life like she had was education. And I'm not sure how I knew that, but I just knew.
Well, and to your point, I think a lot of people with child trauma or a child wound of some sort can relate to the fact that you no longer are a child, right? You are growing
Yes,
up way too soon. I had similar experiences. My mom died when I was 8, and so I took on the weight of the world, not on purpose. It was just like, now I
just
have to
happens.
do what I have to do to live, right? And maybe people that don't have those situations can't relate because they were just, in that safe space. Maybe they felt like you did at school, but they felt like that at home.
Mm-hmm.
I also can
I
relate to
know.
that idea of going and looking at other families, right? You go over to whatever kind of events happening there, because my parents divorced when I was young. And so it's like, oh, I thought everyone's parents like lived separately and did, separate things.
I know.
They don't.
Yeah. No. Hey, surprise.
Yeah.
There's another way.
Yeah. So did you feel that, or did your mom stay with your father through like growing up?
Yes. Yeah, she did. Well, I think it got to a point where maybe when I was about 10, so my sister's 2 years older than me. So I was 10, maybe my sister was 12. And I think my mom, kind of the way it was, my mom passed away a long time ago, but kind of the way it was relayed to me was that she basically said to him, you cannot come home and continue to scare these kids. Like you can't do this. So if you're going to come home drunk, then just don't come home. So this is just a crazy story. So he just stopped coming home. Now he would come to our house. They were still married, but he would come to our house once a week to, I guess, check on us. But honestly, he would terrorize us. So as soon as we would see him pull up in the driveway, fear.
Right.
And you also, I don't know, he had this thing like if you were just, children like to just lay around, right? In the summertime, like you had to look like you were busy doing something. My mom also got to the point where she stopped kind of keeping house and doing things because I think she was just like, you know what,
Yeah.
screw you. I'm not doing anything. Right. And I'm sure she was overwhelmed with two children at an older age than she had me when she was 42. She had my sister when she was 42, my sister when she was 40, me when she was 42. That's, so by the time we were like 10, she was older. And I think she was just like, screw this. So he would always threaten that if we didn't clean up the house, I'm going to burn this blankety blank house down. And to this day, Matt, I am obsessed with fire. Like I'm obsessed with the fear of fire. I check everything to make sure it's unplugged. I check everything to make sure it's off. I just bought this condo and my boyfriend put in all these different light fixtures and things. And I'm like, are you sure that's safe? Are you sure? And he has to reassure me.
Is it UL listed?
Yeah. He's like, he has to reassure me like, okay, here's why it's safe. Here's why this won't happen. You're fine. Because I'm paranoid about fire because so they did stay together.
Oh yeah. Well, but he wanted control, but also sounds like he just wanted to live his own life, but then remind you that he's still controlling your emotions and life and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to just give you a view into this, and this is only recent information that I found out. So my mom died in 1996. And then once she died, my sister and I went to Pensacola for the funeral. And then it was odd because my dad would call my sister and I, and like at the end of the conversation, he would say, I love you. And I'm like, what? I don't, first of all, you hardly know me. And also you were so abusive to us and so controlling and manipulative and struck fear into our hearts. And I just, that doesn't make sense to me. So I ended up going to therapy and talking at length with a therapist many times about this. And I said, I just can't do that. So I decided to not have contact with him after my mom died. So I didn't see him from 1996. Actually, I never saw him. And then he died this year.
Did that do anything?
You mean like emotionally to me?
Like, did that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was reading an article about that because sometimes like I don't know how I feel until I read how other people might feel about something because I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel because it's a little bit like if you told me, oh, hey, Joe down the street? Yeah, he died. I'd be like, oh, that's unfortunate. I mean, that's really the extent of it. But I was reading an article that said that people who grew up in a loving relationship, when the parent dies, they miss what they won't have anymore. But when someone like me, when that abusive parent dies, they miss what they never had.
Yes. Which I think is probably similar to like my situation. Like I don't remember my mother.
Yes.
But if I miss her, I miss the fact that I didn't grow up with a mother, right? So I can get that. But in your case, did you feel like a sense of relief? Like he was no longer kind of like terrorizing the world in some kind of way, or you, like you're no longer terrified that he's going to show up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit. It's interesting because my sister and I have never really been super close, but we've gotten much closer over the years. Of course, that's normal, I think, for as people get older, that's what happens. And so she actually did go to Pensacola for actually before he died. So his new wife, who, by the way, he had started seeing her while my parents were still married. We just never knew where he went. And we just were glad he didn't come to our house and stay at our house and make us miserable 24/7. We didn't know where he went. It's crazy. So my sister maintained contact, and I always say, that's her. I'm not upset about that. That's her way of managing it. That's fine. Well, everybody's got their own coping. But so she went there right before he died, and then he passed. And then so she called me on her way driving back from Pensacola to where she lives in North Carolina. And she's like, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you." So essentially, he had basically started seeing this woman while my parents were still together. And I guess that woman did not know at the time they started seeing each other. She did not know he had kids. She did not know he was married. And she had children. And then apparently he made their lives a living hell too. And had been married before my mom and had another daughter who I think has long since passed away, but apparently also made their lives miserable. So
it's just this pattern.
It is a pattern. I've had people say to me, well, and I understand where this is coming from, but well, maybe that's how he was raised. Like, I'm sure he was raised in an abusive family. I'm certain of it. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, as a grown adult man who you get divorced and you have one child and they don't want to have anything to do with you. And then now the other wife has died and one of those kids doesn't want to have anything to do with you. So you have to ask yourself if it's you. And so like, that's why I say, yeah, he probably was raised that way, and that's fine. I understand that. But also I can only deal with my own shit. I can't deal with his shit. He has to deal with his shit.
But people like that, they don't have self-awareness, and it's
no,
the blame is everywhere but where it should be. I mean, I get it. And unfortunately, your story is not unique, right? And especially for
I know
your generation, even my generation.
Yes.
I just feel like it's so common for people to repeat. But I think that's a nice lead in to you not repeating, right? I feel like, what did you, like, how did you get out? Like, you got out and then what'd you do with it?
Yeah. So I was in, fortunately, I will say my parents were able to pay for my sister and I to go to college. Let's just be clear. College was much different than it is now. They were able to pay as we went and it was totally affordable. I mean, completely affordable. And we had a junior college and what we called a senior college because it was like the second 2 years. And then it turned into a 4-year university right there in my hometown. So I could live at home, go to school. It was great. I stayed in college, ended up getting my degree. But while I was in college, I was actually in a relationship with somebody that I met in high school who, of course, started out nice and just high school sweethearts and blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, I was with him for 6.5 years. I would say about 2 years in is when it started to turn controlling and manipulative. And so, I was 18 when I was 16 when we started dating. I was 18 when that crap started. When you're someone who's already been in an abusive household, you can't really help but end up there again.
Yeah, which is so interesting.
It's normal. Yeah. I think the unknown, which would be that not happening, is scarier than the known, which is like, oh, I know this. I know this behavior.
Weirdly comfortable or familiar. Yeah. Well, I think it's too, like, I was talking to someone the other day. We were talking about depression just in general. And it's so much easier to stay depressed than it is to get out of it. So I think that's probably something that's very similar to, like, this is what I know in an unfortunate way.
It's so true. And I have lifelong anxiety from all this trauma that I still deal with, but it's the same thing. It's easier to live in the anxiousness, even though I don't like it, but it's just what I know. It's so,
I'm the same
and
way. It's
even
so
though you
weird.
hate
Yeah.
it.
Or
Yeah.
like, even to simplify it to like the I don't want to dismiss the fact that we all
No.
have these mental health concerns, but like even when you're in like a sad state, so many of us go to, the music platform that we use and
Oh
find
my
like the
gosh, yes.
saddest
Sad
song
songs,
to listen to because
or watch a sad
right,
movie,
like I
or
just want
yeah.
to, and so I get it. I get having gone through depression and somehow made it out and really not have to face that very often anymore, which is wonderful. But I remember those moments of being like, I could get out of this, but I choose not to. Like, I feel like it's like a blanket, it's like a comfort. So, I mean,
Yes,
I feel
it
like I can
is.
relate,
It
not
is.
having been in that situation, fortunately, growing up, or in a relationship, I haven't, had that, but I can relate to that feeling of like, this is just how it is. It's comfortable,
Yeah. I'm like,
but
well, I
not.
know this. I know how to manage, I guess, if you want to call it that, the sporadicness and the, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And that relationship, he wasn't physically abusive, but he was emotionally, verbally controlling and abusive in that way, and very intimidating, never physical, but very intimidating, and kind of the type of person that I think he knew that I had at the time very low self-esteem. And also, because I came from this household, I think he knew that he could make me feel crappy about myself and thereby control me and think I couldn't do better than him. Like I couldn't find someone to treat me nicely because he was the best I could do. I think he knew that.
I'm really happy that I can't relate to that. Like, I feel like it's a good thing that I can't relate to how you're describing him. Like, I want to lift people up. I can't imagine being like,
I
"Ooh, good,
know.
you're not as good as me. I can keep you down."
It's such a, I remember when, so I was in, I dated him from the time I was in high school till almost maybe like a year before I graduated college. And I'll never forget, I I had this friend in college, and we're not friends anymore. In fact, I lost contact with him, but we were in what they called, I don't know if they call it this, it was like the student union, but they call it the Ratskeller, which I don't really know what that means, but that's what they called it. Anyway, it was like where they had the food and stuff. So we're eating lunch and we're just chit chatting. And we would, he was a super nice guy, just friends, but we would just like, he would make me laugh, and like, we're just chit chatting. And then he's like, so what are you going to do after graduation? I was like, oh, well, I'll probably get married to this, He looked at me like, what the hell? He said to me, Diane, and he's like, I don't understand what you see in this guy. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, what is he doing? Like, where's he going? Is he in college? Is he doing anything with his life? I'm like, well, and I'm making excuses for, and not that college is the be all and end all. And certainly there's lovely people without college degrees. But the point was, he is not adding to your life in any way, shape, or form, and treats you like crap. So my friend was like, he's dead weight. And when he said that to me, I thought, wow, that's really mean. And of course, made excuses. But obviously, it stuck in my brain. And the more I thought about it, and then I just remembered too, I had a really good friend at the time who was also a guy friend. We were like best friends. We worked together at a grocery store. We were like girlfriends, but he was a guy friend. And I remember he told me after I broke up with this ding dong that I was dating, he said, "Oh, I have something to tell you. You might not want to hear it, but I feel like I need to tell you." I was like, "Okay." So he says, "Well," so I'll refrain from using his name, but he said, "Your boyfriend told me that he was seeing all these other girls. He told me that like a few months ago. Like he would tell me of all these things he was doing with other girls." And I said, "Why didn't you tell me that when it was happening?" He said, "Because I knew that if I told you, you would believe him and you wouldn't believe me. And then we would stop being friends. And then how could I help you?" I was like, holy shit. And I said to him, "You know what? You're right. That's exactly what would have happened." That's exactly what would have happened. He would have said to me, your boyfriend's doing this, he's doing this. And I would have said no. And I would have gone to my boyfriend and he would have said, I'm not doing that. Your friend's crazy and you can't be friends with him anymore. And that's what would have happened.
Had anyone before your friend that called your boyfriend a dead weight, had anyone told you before or pointed out your relationship being a little bit toxic?
Oh, yeah. Lots of people. Yeah. My mom didn't like him. Other friends of mine. I didn't have a ton of friends, but this best friend, he did not like him. This guy at school, my college friend, didn't like him. So, yeah, it was made clear to me. My sister didn't like him. So, but it's funny because when you're at that age, you're trying to find your way. Those comments kind of push you more towards the person.
Yeah. What was it? What do you think it was about the dead weight word or that conversation that day that really triggered something?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably because this was a college classmate who I felt like, was trying to have a future of some kind. And, and you got to remember too, we're in Pensacola, small town. Yes, there's people in college, but a lot of people in Pensacola, because it's a small town, again, no offense to people that do this. This is a choice, but a lot of people just stay in Pensacola. And I was curious about I had this dream of like getting a job and moving to Atlanta. It was like, that was the big time for me because I had lived for 22 years in this town and I had never really been anywhere. And so I think in college, it was, to me, it was like other people in college are also, they have goals and dreams and like, this is a person in college who's got goals. And I wonder if he knows something I don't. Like,
I also wonder if it's the phrasing, because if everyone else is like, that guy's a douche, that, like he sucks, all this stuff. But the fact, like the actual phrasing of he will actually hold you down to the ground.
Oh, that's a good observation. Yes,
like I wonder if it was just that, like, all the other things you can handle. It's not like you're stuck in that. He's just a terrible person and you're in this relationship. But this one's like, goodbye dreams, you're stuck.
Yeah. You know what? Nobody has ever, whenever I've shared this story, nobody's ever made that observation. I think that's a good point because when you think of dead weight, you think of maybe you're carrying this heavy thing around and it's dead weight and you throw it off, or dead weight like a person who's drowning, like that you might drown too, right? So that's what dead weight is. So I think it is maybe the word. And he was so blunt. Nobody else was that blunt. I mean, they say like, oh, he doesn't treat you well, or you could do a lot better. And like, what does that really mean?
Right,
like,
those are all dismissive.
Dead weight's pretty clear.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I picture it almost like that, you see the cartoons with the shackle on the ankle and like just the anvil.
The lead
right
shoes.
Here,
yes, right? Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like...
No, it's a good point.
So many people are in that same position that you were in. Even to this day, people stay in relationships and sometimes it's just some random phrase that triggers us to do something. It's funny, my episode 2 guest, Shauna, she, like, her pivotal moment was literally getting the mail one day. She got an envelope in the mail that her husband had... It was like paperwork to start a new business that he hadn't even told her about. And he had done all this stuff. And it's just like everything else had, like, she was aware of everything else that was happening, but it was that, like, seeing that piece of paper.
One thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you mother. Yeah.
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 So what happened when you, like, did you feel, when you broke up, did it take a while to do that? Or did you feel like you were just like, okay, new me?
I mean, I often say to people that I almost felt like I woke up one day and was a new me and like a whole different mindset. And it still took a while, not a long while, but it shifted my way that I interacted with him. So then he, like in the next time I saw him when he was douchey to me, I was like, And then I came back at him and he was like,
who are you?
Who are you? And I remember, that's when the arguments really got heated because I had enough. And I told him, I said, this is bullshit. I can't. And then I think he really started to realize I was probably going to break up with him. And I will never forget sitting in the parking. Like I worked at the grocery store. I was a cashier and he came in the grocery store. He's like, I want to talk to you after work. And I was like, oh God. So, and at that point, and maybe this wasn't very nice, but he didn't treat me nicely. So I think at that point, I was just like, I really don't care about your feelings. I just want you gone. I can't do this anymore. So we sat in the parking lot and in my car, and he was crying, and I was like, this is bullshit. Where were these tears before? Right. And I was envisioning myself ending up like my mom, stuck with this abusive husband. Like,
But you hadn't thought that before?
it never really dawned on me that where this was leading. And that's where it was leading, is that I was going to end up like that. But when it dawned on me, I was like, oh boy. So that's when I kind of turned into a different person and was like, nobody will do this to me again. So I became this like, no BS. Nobody, I used to say, nobody's going to F with me. Like, nobody, right? Nobody's going to do this. So I pretty much broke it off. And then I always joke that after I broke up with him, because I liked to go to this dance club in Pensacola, and I wasn't a drinker. I just liked to dance. So I would go with my guy friend, and he would keep guys away from me, and I could just dance and have fun. So it was perfect. But I used to joke that I would like, here's my number. Here's because I hadn't dated anybody for 6.5 years. And I was like, I wonder who's out there for me. Right. Yeah. So then I just focused on, finishing college and kind of having fun, and then met what would become my husband. We're actually not married anymore, but what would become my husband, who surprisingly was in the military. But he was and is, well, not was, he's still alive, but he is. And when I met him, was just the nicest person. Just, I mean, could not be a nicer person. My mom loved him, just a complete and utter opposite. And I remember in one of our very first discussions saying to him, explaining what had happened in my previous relationship. And I said, just as a heads up, that will not happen again. So I think I was putting him on notice, like, don't try to F with me. You will regret it,
Was it a little odd to, like, were you almost like, are you real? Is this real, or are you pretending? Because didn't you say, like, at the beginning of the other relationship, it was kind of like, you're nice until you're not?
Yeah. I think I didn't think he necessarily, are you pretending? But what I did think was, always have an out. Because when we ended up getting married, I hyphenated my last name, even though, like, I didn't really care about my last, because now Diane Diaz is my ex-husband's last name. So my legal last name is actually hyphenated with my maiden name, but I don't even use my maiden name anymore. That was really just a control thing, and like a way to have part of me still be me. And we had separate accounts for a long time, until we'd been married for quite a while. And I kept a credit card in my maiden name only, just in case. So I always had this in the back of my mind, like, in case you have to get out of here, in case something goes sideways, you got to be able to take care of yourself, which is probably, you mentioned my work ethic. And I think that's where that comes from.
Well, and I was also wondering if, because of all the trauma, as a child, but also in this relationship afterwards, do you think that your, like, hard ass protection in any way, like, kind of hurt any situations immediately after that? Do you feel like you lost out because you were being so protective of yourself?
Are you some kind of a therapist?
No, I'm just listening.
Are you? What? Okay. Yes, 100%. And I think to this day, it actually hurts me, because because I think that I have to solely be responsible for taking care of myself. It's hard for me to let other people take care of me. So it's hard to ask for help. And so I had a situation recently. So I've been with my boyfriend now for, oh my gosh, how long have we been together? Since 2010. Wow, long time. Yeah. So, and I had to have surgery recently. And then simultaneously also was finding out I had to get out of my apartment that I'd lived in for 12 years, because the rent was increasing, you know how rents are, and had to try to buy a house. And then also came down with shingles while I was recovering from it. So all this stuff was happening. I mean, I had to ask for help. I mean, I didn't, and fortunately, I learned that people who love you will help you. I mean, why wouldn't he help me? Right. And so he was amazing. And so was his family. They were just, and even my friends, even Carol, who I work for Speaking Your Brand, she was there for me. So my having to protect myself from the dangers that came from this trauma, it makes it very difficult to have close friends because it's not that I don't trust people. It's that I think I have to just do everything for myself.
Well, and also just kind of, I don't know if you still do this, but going into things where you have to have an out. Like
Totally.
that
Yes.
that in itself, I think just as humans, that can block a lot of good things from happening, right? If we know that, like,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
my toe is like hanging out the door just in case, or I'm holding the door open just a smidge so that I can
Yeah.
escape. I get it. And I think a lot of that is not so much the relationship with your ex-boyfriend, but rather the child part. Because I feel the
Oh, for
same.
sure.
I know I didn't grow up in an abusive home, but losing a parent as a young child,
Mm-hmm.
I felt the same growing up. Like I had to do everything myself because what if my dad dies? Like, what if
Yeah.
I'm left alone? I
Yeah.
need to have the capabilities of doing this. So, and to this day, I would, there are a lot of times I've gotten better with delegation and asking people for help in those areas. But still, I'm getting this, I call it my pandemic graduate degree right now. If we're getting a team project, I'm the first one being like, okay, here's what we're doing. I'll do this big part that's going to be most of the grade. And you guys do that, like really controlling that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it stems from being a kid, which led in and having a parent die, which led into me feeling like I had to be perfect so that other people wouldn't
Oh my
leave.
God. Yes.
Right. And so that's where that
Yes.
question stems from. I'm not a therapist.
No, well, it's a good observation though, because it it is a protective
Mm-hmm.
mechanism, right? Like if the shit hits the fan, Diane will be okay because she's done this, and this, right? And she can manage for herself. And and the flip side of that is it's really unfortunate because it I don't want to always be that way. Like I want to I also I think it is being a loving human to let other people help you because it shows that you support one another and you when somebody offers to help you, it's a loving gesture to allow them to help you. Like it took me a long time to learn. So when I was married, I like was very even married, very independent, do everything for myself. Like I got this, I got this, I got this. But now in this relationship with my boyfriend, he's very much a caretaker because he also has a daughter, and so he understands caretaking. But he also is very handy, and so
Your dad had a daughter. He didn't understand.
good point.
He's just a good
No,
human, your boyfriend.
he's a good human. Yes, that's a really good point. Good point. Good point. Yes. So my boyfriend happens to also be very handy. And I'm always like, no, I can do this. I can. And I've had to learn over the years to just let him help me
Mm-hmm.
because he actually loves helping me. And so it's not just for me, it's also for him.
I think that goes back to that comfort. Like you stick to what makes you feel the safest, right? And whether it's good or
Yes.
bad. But I also think, are you similar to me in which you'll see people that are like literally live like flying by the seat of their pants, and you're like, man, I wish I could do that.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. I remember years ago when I was working in a corporate environment and we went on a work trip somewhere to this, I think this town in North Carolina. And we were just, after work, like browsing around some of the shops in this cute little area. And we started talking to this couple that owned like a jewelry shop. And I was asking them, like, where'd you get the jewelry? And she's like, oh, I make it. And I said, oh, you make it? And then she's telling me, yeah, we live on a sailboat part of the year. Like we chucked our jobs and sold everything we own. We live on this. And she's telling me this, and I'm thinking, God, that sounds magical. Like I could never. I so envy people, like people who live in an RV or like I am fascinated by their stories, and I think, oh my God, that must just feel so good to be able to let all this crap go in our life. But I don't feel like I could let go of what makes me feel safe. But it's really a false sense of safety if we're being real, right?
Oh, totally. I watch people. I'm like, and then I'm like, oh, I could do that. And then I start like creating my lists, and I create like, okay,
You're
so
like, I can't do
in
this.
order for this to happen, this needs to happen.
Right.
And these people, I mean, I don't think they do that. I think they just jump into it, and
No,
like wherever life takes
I
them,
know.
good for them.
Oh my God.
Sad for us.
Oh my God. I would love for maybe like a week just to have that in me and just experience it, just experience what it's like to be. Yeah, I'll be fine. Like I just don't, I have to have like all my ducks in a row, have to have all the insurances that I need to have. And I have to have a plan, and I have to have money in the bank, and I have to get, and these people just go and do. And I'm like, wow, that must feel so good sometimes.
Yeah, but then maybe they look at us and are like, oh, they got it together. They're making smart choices, you know?
Maybe.
Yeah. I remember
I hope so.
I had this job once that was just so toxic. Like I hated life by going to this job. And so after 3 months at that job, I quit, and I didn't have a backup plan, and which is like not
Oh,
me. But it was just like,
yeah.
okay, I'm old enough now. I need to focus on this mental health aspect, which is far more important. But what was funny to me, and maybe you can relate to this, but no one, everyone that talked to me about it, no one really asked, like, why are you doing that? Like, are you okay? It was, how
Mm-hmm.
many days can you go without a job? And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
look, guys, that's not the important part here. Like, you should know me. I probably have some plans in place when it comes to that. Like let's focus on this part right here. That's more important. So I think
Mm-hmm.
society's really focused on people like us that kind of plan and do those things, and then we just kind of live vicariously through the people that quit their jobs and run off to the Maldives and live
Live on a
there.
sailboat. Yeah. I know. Live on a sailboat and make jewelry. I was like, that just sounds so magical.
It does. And then, but you'd probably be bored with it after a while.
Well, and also I
You're a
think,
producer. You're
you
like
know,
someone that likes
yes,
to do things.
I like to do things. And also I need, my boyfriend's mom asked me this recently. She said, oh, do you think you'll retire at the like 62 or maybe earlier? Or do you think you'll keep working? I said, I think because I don't have a physical job, so it's not like wearing me down physically. I have two jobs where I use my brain, and I like that because it makes me feel valuable. And honestly, it does keep you young when you keep using your brain. And so I don't know, like I feel like I need that. I feel like I need to feel valuable. I need to feel like I can use my brain and I can do things and contribute and, do something meaningful.
I'm the same way. So we're very similar, I think. But do you think that a lot of these check marks that you do in your life are because you didn't get that approval from your dad? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I just
Absolutely.
strive to like, and here's is a funny story actually. And this episode is coming out way after this, so I'll be graduated by now.
Yeah.
I recently had like I put on, I think maybe it was LinkedIn, like, should I go to graduation? Like, what, like, is this a thing that I should be doing?
Mm.
And I got like I got so many responses being like, you need to celebrate this. Like, you actually did like you, and to me it was like, oh, to me it was like a check mark. It was just like, this is what
Yeah.
I'm doing. Like, okay, I turned in this assignment, I did this, I did this. And it was never like, oh wow, I'm doing something that a lot of people just don't do, and like, and I'm doing it well. And so it was very weird to me at 41 to like have other people tell me like, you accomplished something and you should celebrate that. And like, part of me growing up
Mhm.
was like, no, it's just like, that's my next milestone. It's not anything to celebrate. It's just gonna mean I'm getting closer to this thing that doesn't exist. Are you the same way?
Yeah, yeah, like doing all the right things and like, oh, get a college degree, check. Get a master's degree, check. Bought a home, check. Like I'm doing all the things, and then you don't. I don't. I also am not a big. I've never really cared about my birthday. I really don't care about holidays, but I think largely because being in a household that was abusive, like it's a day like any other day, and it's just another day to have trauma, right? So I don't. So I've had to like relook at that because other people, like my boyfriend and his family, want to celebrate my birthday. So I'm like, oh, right, because that's what we're supposed to do. Like we're supposed to be joyful about this, and it doesn't even register for me.
How are you at celebrating your successes or talking about them? Like if you get a big client or something, do you tell people?
Yeah, I do. Like I'm actually pretty good about that because I feel like I put in all this work and I do want to. I don't know though if it's maybe. Here's an interesting thing. Like I like it when, and I think my bosses know this about me. I like for them to just say great job. I don't even need like all the like woohoo and fanfare. I just need for the person who is who I'm like answering to, so to speak, to, like to say, yeah, you did a great job on that, whatever. And then I feel like, okay, got my gold star, like I think that goes back to like school was a safe place. When I did well, I got the gold star.
It's approval.
This is like the adult version of school. Yeah. It's the adult version of school.
Well, if your boss is listening, I would also like more money. But
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Bosses, more money,
Yes.
please.
No, I mean, but do you intentionally put out there like something that you're proud of and say, look, I'm proud of what I've accomplished here. Here it is.
Probably not as much as I should. Yeah, probably not as much as I should.
I've recently started to, since this conversation that I had with people about just like actually walking, because I didn't walk for my MBA that I got 162 years ago. I part of it was because 10 months prior to that, I had graduated with my bachelor's. I stupidly did an MBA in 10 months, and I do not recommend that to anyone. But I was like, why do I need to walk again? I was 23, like it was just like, and it was just another check mark. It was like, this is getting me down the field, like whatever that end zone looks like, it's getting me closer. And so taking this conversation about graduating this time and being proud about that, I'm trying to lean in to celebrating things. Even with this podcast, it's hard to self-promote, right? It's hard to, guys, listen, it's so, like this is my most favorite thing that I've ever done, but I also don't want to be like annoying. And part of me thinks self-promotion is annoying.
Yeah. It's funny because I talk a lot to clients about this idea of self-promotion. And so I think it's not so hard for me to self-promote. I think maybe sometimes it's just hard to recognize what is an accomplishment because I feel like I'm just constantly doing the things, right? And so something to me that just seems like, well, yeah, I just did that. Other people are like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's great. Like I'm just doing the things, but I can easily tell other people, you need to promote yourself. And this was great. But to see it for myself.
Are you dismissive when other people come in and like, oh my God, I can't believe what you're doing?
Yeah, no, I try to accept it. I've learned that over time though. Because that's something I have learned over time to, I think similarly to accepting help is like accepting, props and kudos and praise and like, because again, it's as much for you as it is for the other person, right? It's a relationship.
Well, hopefully both of us will get better at recognizing the achievements that we have. And that's why I started out earlier just saying like, this is how I see you. I think it's important for other people to know. I mean, we do similar jobs, right? In the one job that we share, but to see other people taking it so seriously and passionate and like, let's go and change the world with what we're doing. It's infectious, and it's infectious in a good way. Not in a bad way.
Yeah,
and
not in a pandemic way.
I think it's important for you to know that that's how I see you as a coworker, and I don't want to be you because you do a lot more than me, but I want you to.
I don't think that's true.
Again, there we go. Let's just dismiss what we do.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I mean, I think all the successes, do you think that most of the successes that you have now and the things that you've accomplished, whether that's personal and relationships and your jobs and your projects and, the 500 other things that you're doing at the same time. Do you think that is a product of being in a fearful home as a child and not getting the love that you needed in those things?
Yes. And I will say, I was just reading or listening to a podcast, I can't remember, about just that, about how people with anxiety will say, well, it's because of my anxiety and it's because of my trauma that I'm so successful. And yes. And it's also what maybe holds you back in areas like allowing people to help you and, letting yourself off the hook when when you're not, perfect, or, when you make a decision that ends up being not the best decision. Like, I probably am the hardest on myself when I make a decision, and then later on I'll beat myself up about it continually for a long time, and really the outcome of it's not that bad. I just think I that was not a good decision, and I don't like that I made it. So that also comes from the anxiety and from the trauma. So yes, it has spurred me to do the things I've done, but it also for sure needs to be addressed because it does have a shadow side, right?
Sure. And I also think that people that face trauma, we have to fight, right? We have to fight to get to the other
Mm-hmm.
side. We have to, whether it's people that are in a depression, or they've had an actual
Mm-hmm.
family trauma or whatever. I'm not discounting anyone's experiences, but I think that's what makes us, I want to say, it makes us better humans to have gone through really shitty experiences. And if we have the wherewithal to acknowledge what it was, I think we can be better to each other and to ourselves because of it.
I would agree with that because I mean this your podcast I think is a prime example of that, because if you had not had that, perhaps you would not have created this space for these conversations, right? And so it's a way to, when you have that in your background, you recognize it in others and you can honor it and you can support people and you can be understanding of people, like where did they come from to arrive at where they are at,
Yeah.
and how they're doing and being in the world.
Yeah, I always have this like uncomfortable statement. I've said it a couple times in these episodes, is like, if someone asked me like, would you go back in time and change what happened? And at this point, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't, because all the crap that I went through is the reason that I am who I am right now and what I do. And I'm finally at a place where I feel proud of most of that, right? And I need to get better at celebrating accomplishments, but I feel like I don't want to change anything, and I'm proud of the mess. I had a friend that actually, she said, "Our mess is our message," and I was like,
It's true.
"You are so right." Because it like you said, it gives us the ability to connect and to have empathy and to just understand people on a human level. All right, so I'm going to end this conversation with a question that is not really answerable, but I like to ask it.
Oh,
So,
okay.
if current version of you could go back and talk to that 6 or 7-year-old version of you scared in that
Mm.
home, what would you say to her?
Mm. You wait till the end of this thing to make me cry. Oh my gosh. Oh, 1 second. Okay. I think I can answer this. I think I would say that it's not always going to be like this. It's survivable, and also get therapy when you get older
Yeah.
because like you can't. For years I tried to just tough it out, but you can't. It's eventually going to catch up to you, and you have to. It's fine to talk to your friends and family, but you have to talk to a professional and someone who's not connected to you personally to be able to give you objective insight into your own shit that's happening as a result of that trauma. I mean, you can't see that on your own. I mean, now sometimes I'm able to see it on my own because I have been to therapy so many times for these things, but But I would say to 6-year-old Diane, like, it's not always going to be like this. Also, get closer to your sister. I would tell her that, and get therapy, because it's only going to at least improve your outlook on how you move about the world and other people, because how you relate to other people, because it's relating to other people is a struggle because of the people that were supposed to have loved me that didn't, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
I think that's really special. I think, you can't go back to that little girl, but to be able to go back and tell the little girl that's still in your head, that sometimes makes those decisions for you, that, like, look where you are right now, and you are a wonderful human being from the bit that I know of you, having worked with you. And I am so very glad that you came on the Life Shift podcast to share this story, because unfortunately you're not alone. You're not the only person that has gone through this. But I will say that's fortunate, right? Because we can all connect. And
absolutely.
So I appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Matt. Thanks for the kind words, and thank you for making a space for people to share these stories, because I think it's in silence that these things continue, but when we bring them out in the open, everybody gets to heal. So thank you.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.